So in this part 2 of the virtual button video, I'll show you how we can add another virtual button and start an animation of this cube so it just starts to rotate. Let's start out by making the animation of the cube. So let's select the cube, go to Window, go to Animation, and click Animation. So for the cube, we want to just create a simple animation. So click the Create button. It wants you to save a new animation. I'll just call this one Cube Anim. As soon as it's saved, you'll be able to see it over here in the inspector. So Animator, and the controller is called Cube. And now what we can do is we can add a property. So if you click Add Property, we go to Transform. We'll just add a simple rotation. So hit the plus button next to rotation. We'll go to the final keyframe of this timeline here. We'll click the Record button. And then outside in the Unity editor, we'll go for the rotation. And we'll just rotate it 360 degrees around its own axis. To make sure that it just has a continuous action here, we can also select both of these keyframes. We can right click them and we can choose that the tangents, in this case, this is going to be like a Bezier and stuff. We can choose them to be linear. And now we can turn off the animation recording here, and we can also close the animation tab again. What we need to do now is we need to set up the animation for the cube. So go to Window, go to Animation and Animator. This is the controller itself. It should open the controller for the cube itself. If it doesn't, you can always click the cube and then double click the cube controller here. As you can see here, I have my cube anim as my default state. However, this would mean that as soon as it spawns, it would start doing this animation. So I would need an empty state first. Right click here, create a state and select empty, and just set this as our default state. So set as default state. This means that we will always be able to create or select the animation. If you wanted to, you can also make a transition from the cube anim to the new state, meaning that when the cube anim is done rotating once, it would go back to the new state, meaning it would stop. So to make sure that the animation also loops, go to cube anim here and make sure that the loop time is checked. If it is, it'll loop all the time, over and over again. Let's go back to the scene here and let's set up the next virtual button. So click the image target, go to the image target behavior, unfold Advanced, and click Add Virtual Button. This will add another virtual button, the one below here. Just to make sure that we know the difference, I'll just add _anim to this so we know that this is our animation virtual button. I will move the button over into the other corner right here, and I'll also scale this up just a bit. To make this a bit easier for us and to just like have an on-off switch here that will only be able to turn it on, we'll change the script that we had a moment ago. So I'll go back into Visual Studio. This is the code that we had before, and on button released, it's basically just gonna do nothing, so just comment out the set active to false here. And let's save it, and we'll jump back into Unity. So now what we need to do is we need to set up a script for this virtual button as well. Let's give it a name first. So over here in the name, we'll say VBTN number 2. We'll set it to be medium, just as the other one. Go to image target, go to the bottom here. We have VBTN, but we also need one for the animation. So we'll click add component. We'll call it VBTN_anim. As soon as the script is created, we can double click and we can open up in Visual Studio. Once again, we want to add the namespace Vuforia. So using Vuforia, and we need to have a few things that this needs. So first of all, we need a public animator reference, and we'll call this cube anim. And then we also, of course, need the virtual button itself. So public virtual button behavior, and once again, we'll call it VB. So in the start, in this case, we also just want to have a register on button pressed. So we'll say VB.register on button pressed, and then in parentheses, we'll set up a on pressed method that we want to run. So once again, we don't need the update behavior. And what we will set up here is now the on button pressed. It's a public void. This needs the virtual button behavior, local variable VB, and in here we'll just say that we want our cube anim.play, and here we'll just reference the name for our specific animation, and we call it cube anim. So this means that it'll go into the animator, gonna look for an animation called cube anim, and it's gonna play back that animation for our button. So save this file, go back into Unity. So the final thing we need to do is we need to go down here into the script, and when it's done compiling, we need to add our cube. This is the animator for the cube, so it should say parentheses animator, and we need the new virtual button added as well. So as soon as these two are added, let's save the scene and let's test it out. So as you can see here, we have our marker visible to the camera. If I hover over the first button, it'll spawn in the cube. If I hover over the other button, it'll start rotating. You could of course also have a on button release and then have the animation stop. This is how you set up a virtual button for animation behavior inside of Unity using Vuforia. Thank you for watching, everyone.